Oh, hey guys, let's pray. Dear Lord, I thank you for tonight that all of us are gathered here, open the word, and see what you have to say for us. I pray that you speak to us through this lesson. Help us to live it out. Not let this just be today, but
All right, grab your Bible, turn to John chapter 21. As we wrap up, we're going to be looking at the last half of that chapter. And this last chapter of John answers a couple of questions and provides some transition from, we go from Jesus' resurrection, and then Acts kind of picks up the story right after all the Gospels conclude. But Acts picks up and just kind of takes off and runs with it. And the first question that John deals with, that we're going to look at tonight, is regarding Peter. Because the whole first half of the book of Acts, Peter is used by God in some incredible ways. And basically, the last time we saw Peter was not a good interaction, was not a good encounter. We didn't leave Peter on a high note. Okay, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Sunday morning, he shows up at the empty tomb. He sees it, but that's about it. And that's kind of where we leave the story of Peter. And so it's kind of dangling. And so John gives some context and a bridge that shows us, how did Peter go from, I don't even know who you're talking about, being the most influential person in the church. And that's what we're going to see here at the end of John chapter 21. He also addresses, he's going to squelch a rumor that's going around the church. That never happens today, fortunately. There's no rumor in the church. People don't talk and stuff like that. But he's going to squelch a rumor that was going around the church of that day. And people took a comment Jesus made to one of his disciples and made it mean, and tried to make it mean something it didn't mean. And John's going to be like, let's get this straightened out. Let's figure this out. So those are 2 basic things that we're going to look at tonight that happened, but there's a couple points that we're going to make along the way. So John, if you remember, is writing this probably about 60 years after Jesus had ascended into heaven. 60 years. So John is an old man when he's writing this. And he's got a lot of context, a lot of history. And he's looking back on every other disciple has died. And almost all of them have died martyrs' deaths.
John lived into his 90s.
Yeah, exactly. And so they had all died as martyrs for Jesus. They gave their lives up for Jesus. And so he's seen this happen over and over, and heard gotten the reports of his friends that he spent years with, who have now given their lives for the cause of Christ. And so he's going to turn the attention to the transition. How do we get from where Peter was to where we see him pick up in the book of Acts? Because in the book of Acts, Peter starts off like guns a-blazing with talking to the religious people of that day. He wasn't denying anything. He was saying, this Jesus who you killed, you must trust him. You must put your faith in him. And it tells us they were cut to the heart. Thousands gave their lives. How did Peter get from, I don't know, to that? First thing we're going to see in these first couple verses is that restoration only comes through Jesus. Let's look at John 21, verses 15 through 17. It says, when they had finished breakfast, so if you remember the first part of John, Jesus shows up. They're out fishing. They went out fishing all night and caught what? Nothing. Okay? And interesting point I read and I shared last time. The disciples never catch a single fish in all the gospel accounts unless Jesus miraculously intercedes. Were they bad fishermen, or do we just have the accounts of the times that they're bad? Yeah, so good thing they took up another job. Huh? Yeah, you need to quit your day job, okay? You're not even good at this, so come on. So so Jesus shows up on the shore and has breakfast ready for them. And he tells them to throw the nets on the other side of the boat. You're doing this all wrong, guys. You throw the net over here, throw the net over here. Basically, he turns and keeps going. So they go from catching nothing all night to, in the next few minutes, 153 large fish. So much that they can't even get the nets back in the boat. They come back up on shore, have breakfast with Jesus, and he interacts with them. So after breakfast, after they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, you sing this now, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Lord, you know that I love you. He said, tend my lambs. Verse 16. Then he said to him again a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, shepherd my sheep. Verse 17, he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. So what we have here, Jesus intentionally interacts and has an intentional conversation with Peter. Things don't happen. Meaningful things don't happen by accident. Purposeful things in life happen because we decide to do that, decide to move forward. Jesus decided, he was intentional about this relationship. He was intentional about this act of restoration. We're probably not going to fall into that haphazardly. Jesus calls him out and says, Peter, I want to have a conversation. Intentional interaction. It's interesting. Think of the tension Peter has around Jesus now. Because what did Jesus tell him up in the upper room about his actions of that night? Peter, you're not willing to lay down your life for me right now. In fact, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter does. And as the rooster crows, one of the Gospels tells us he and Jesus lock eyes. Awkward conversation going on here. Hey, Peter. Interestingly, Jesus didn't talk to the other disciples about Jesus. He didn't hold a grudge against Jesus. He didn't give Jesus silent treatment. You know all those things we do? Yeah. He didn't do any of those. Instead, he said, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to interact with him. Talk to you. So he addressed it directly with Peter. We read, last time we met, we read the first part of John chapter 21. That the disciples who were fishing, when they came ashore, that Jesus had a fire going there with fish on it, and he had some bread there. And so they come in to shore after fishing all night. They're hungry. Jesus has breakfast ready for them. But it's interesting because Jesus has it's not a campfire he has. The Bible uses a very specific word that's only used 2 places in the whole Bible. It's a charcoal fire. And so it specifically says Jesus has a charcoal fire. Fish on it. The only other time that word is used is a couple weeks earlier, on the night of Jesus' arrest. In John chapter 18, start reading at verse 17, it says, it talks about right after Jesus was arrested, Peter's following him, and the slave girl who kept the door said to Peter, "You're not the one of this man's disciples, are you?" Peter said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the officers were standing there, having made a charcoal fire, for it was cold, and they were warming themselves. And Peter was also with them there, standing and warming himself. Where? At the charcoal fire. Jump down to verse 25. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, so they said to him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest being a relative of the one whose ear Peter cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Peter then denied it again, and immediately the rooster crowed. I remember, there's been some holidays where we'll do something fun as a family. There's some holidays where we have a project. It's like, okay, I'm doing yard work all day, and it's Labor Day, it's whatever day, and we're doing something amazing. Labor. And then, so you're outside working, and then it comes about dinner time, and I'm thinking, okay, what leftovers do we have? Peanut butter jelly sandwich, whatever. And I smell over the fence the neighbors out of this house. But you smell in the neighborhood somebody's grilling. Who's got the fire going, cooking burgers. That very distinct. All you have to do is smell it. Like, oh yeah. Because it has a very distinct smell. Know when someone's cooking. Jesus took that experience and he replicated it because he had to bring it back to have a full understanding of his betrayal of Jesus. So we see at first charcoal fire, we see Peter rise 3 times. But all 3 of those times he's standing by that charcoal fire. Now sitting at the charcoal fire on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus says, Peter. Except he doesn't call him Peter, does he? What does he call him? Simon, son of John. That's okay. You know when your parents use your middle name, you're in trouble, right? Okay, so that's how Jesus referred to Peter when he's like, Simon, son of John. He talked. Okay, that kind of thing. We have something to straighten out here. I need to Simon, son of John. 3 times. And so he asked him that same question, but the first time he asked him with a little different twist, doesn't he? First time he says, "Do you love me more than these?" A little different question than the other 2 times. Do you love me? In the context of that conversation, I'm sure Peter knew exactly what Jesus was referring to, because Jesus may have gestured at something. But here we have this pronoun dangling without a use a technical term, antecedent. We don't know what it's referring to. More than what? You love me more than. Could mean several different things. You love me more than all these fish you caught? This is a pretty good haul. You love me more than these friends that you have? Do you love me more than your old lifestyle? Do you love me more than these guys love me? Because Peter had told Jesus at one point, I'll be the only one who lays down my life for you. No one else will do that. I will do that. You really love me? And how did Peter answer all 3 times? Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. All 3 times, so Jesus says, "You love me more than these." So what's Jesus' root question? Does it really matter what the these are? Does it? Is that really important? I think the real question is, do you love me more than anything else? Honestly, that's kind of the question that Jesus has put out there for people before. If you don't love me more than father and mother and brother and sister and all your worldly possessions, if you're not willing to lay down all your riches and follow me. That was a conversation with the Christian ruler. Sell all you have. You love me more than me? Is there something you love more than me, Peter? Anything? Peter's response wasn't just a, yes, I love you. It was, Lord, you know that I love you. That's interesting because he's telling Jesus, you know that I love you. Because Jesus also knew that he was going to deny him. Jesus, you know me. You know what's going on in my heart. You knew I was going to deny you, and now you know that I do love you. Peter, do you love me more than doing things your way? Peter, do you love me more than depending on yourself? Do you love me more than deciding what you want to do on your own? Or fitting in people around you? Do you love me more than all that? So just jumping over to a quick application challenge. That's kind of a convicting question. What if Jesus was looking at you, said, do you love me? I don't think we're that yet. But yeah, we'll get ready to that. I'm almost there, I guess. But if Jesus was sitting with you and said, called your name and said, do you love me? Could you affirmatively answer, Lord, you know that I love you. You know what's in my heart. Jesus told us a couple things about what it means to love God. In John 14:15 he said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. You'll obey me. You'll walk in obedience to me. You'll do what I've called you to do. What did Jesus call Peter to do? Feed my sheep. Feed my flock, shepherd the flock. And the plan. Essentially, take care of the body of Christ. Help grow and build up the body of Christ, those who follow Jesus. I want you to invest your life in them and building that. That's what I'm calling you. So Jesus restores that relationship with Peter. Because you got to imagine, that was, especially going back to the first encounter Jesus and Peter had after the resurrection. Imagine being the one who flat out denied him, and now you're facing it. It'd be pretty awkward, again. Awkward would be a good word. But he not only restores a relationship, but he confirms the ministry he has ahead for him. So now we got those two principles first one is restoration. God's restoration matches purpose. To the degree that you fail, God's restoration is abundantly above and beyond that. Your failure will never exceed God's grace. Your failure will never exceed God's ability to forgive. Your failure, you can't fail bigger than God can restore. So don't give up. So don't quit. So don't think you've blown it. I've messed up. No, you just got a really interesting story that God's going to do something crazy with and bring himself a whole lot of glory. That's the case. But God's going to take your story. God's going to take your failures. God's going to take the things that you didn't know how you would get through and restore and build you up. How much worse can it get than denying Jesus 3 times while he's being crucified for your sin?
He was very disloyal.
He does. What does Jesus do? Takes him, brings him right back. Says, I'm not done. Yes, blew it. But we're moving on. Because you love me. And I have a child. Second one, we're called to minister in spite of it. Your life Your decision is not rationale to say, I can never help, but I'm not involved. I can't do that. Look at Peter's life. Look at the way God can take a testimony. Here's the first story. When Marty and I were going, there was a guy there. He drove a green Cadillac that was gold wheels on it, decked out. I mean, this thing was crazy. He was a former pimp, and he still dressed like it. The suit, the shiny suit, the bling, everything, the car. Do you remember his name? Okay, I can't remember his name either. Yeah, a little bit. That's the life he came from. And yeah, if you saw him walking down the street, you'd be like, okay. And you'd be right. And God was using him in amazing, incredible ways because his story, what God delivered him from, was greater than the sin he had engaged in. And his story changed the lives of so many people that us in our lifestyle, they look at us and be like, I don't know. Every one of us has such a different story, such a different background. God's going to take those quirky things in your life, those failures in your life, and if you give them to Him, if you let Him restore you to a relationship with Him in a right way and move forward and say, yes, I will serve you, He's going to take that weirdness that's in your life, that awkwardness, those uncomfortable situations, and He's going to bring you across the path of someone, and you're going to be like, dude, I had no idea God could ever. I had no idea God could ever work through a situation like this. Passage in Colossians chapter 1, I love. It talks about that same concept. And it says, God, no matter what you come through, no matter how hard it's been for you, God comforts us in those times. And He uses us to comfort others with the comfort with which we have been comforted. Follow all that? Essentially, God brings healing to our lives, and then He uses us to be a vehicle for that to be given to someone else. You're a tool. Let God use you. Let God restore you, and let God use you. He can restore Peter. Dude, you're in good shape. So Peter discovers Jesus is the only source of restoration. Jesus is the only way I'm going to get back on the right track in my life. Jesus is the only way I'm going to get back right in my relationship with God. Second thing we're going to take a look at is that current circumstances don't define God's plan for my future. So just because something's this way now doesn't mean it's always going to be that way. I probably could have said that a lot more succinctly, but I didn't. So deal with it. So verses 18, 19, let's look at them. Truly, truly, I say to you. So whenever Jesus says truly, truly, He's saying, this is a fact that I know. Here's something I am fully aware of. I know for sure this is the real deal, and I know this because it is true. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wish. So He's still talking to Peter here. So in your young days, you kind of did what you wanted. You walked wherever you wish. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go. Now He said this, signifying by what kind of death He would glorify God. And when He had spoken this, He said to him, follow me. Anybody remember how Peter died? Crucified upside down is what church tradition tells us.
He was actually the first ever pope, St. Peter. That's why the popes call their position the throne of St. Peter.
That doesn't have anything to do with how He died.
But He died as the pope.
So He was crucified. So as you look at this, we see where this is headed here. And John gives us some editorial commentary here because this event, by the time John writes this event has already happened. Peter was crucified probably about 63 or 64, somewhere in there, AD. So this is about 30 years in the past for when John's writing this. But Jesus has shown Peter a contrast that's going to take place in his life. So, Peter, let's contrast your younger days and your older days. In your younger days, you were free, you did what you wanted, you went where you wanted, and you kind of took care of things as you saw fit. The difficulty, challenges are ahead. Your life isn't going to always be the same. So as Jesus is saying this, John makes it clear that Jesus isn't just saying, Peter, you're going to be arrested because you're preaching the gospel. Peter, you're going to be persecuted, and you're going to be heckled by the crowd, and you're going to be resisted by the leadership. All that stuff was true, but John gives us perspective. Jesus said this to signify kind of death that was to God. So what does he tell Peter here? What is Jesus revealing to Peter? Sometimes we look at it and we kind of see, Peter, you're going to die. But there's a little more to it than that. Because he says, when you're old, you're young now. When you're old, you have many years of ministry. You have many years, and this isn't a blanket promise for the whole world. This is Jesus, Peter talking. Okay? You have many years ahead. When you're old, it says you'll die with your arms outstretched. You'll go places you won't want to go to that form of death. You won't want to face that, but it will bring glory to God. So here's the message Jesus is giving Peter. Your life is kind of going pretty smooth right now. Don't get comfortable in that. Don't get confident in that, in those circumstances, because circumstances, the world around us changes. I've seen people go from thriving in their walk with God to dive bombing because the circumstances that they were in changed and they weren't ready for a change. They couldn't handle anything but life being easy, everything at church being happy, everyone loving on everybody and being kind. They get into a difficult situation and their faith with God just dive bombs. Don't get comfortable because life isn't all going to be the same. On the flip side, some of you have come through so much turmoil and so much difficulty in your life. It doesn't necessarily mean your whole life is going to be like that. Things will change. Sometimes we get to a position, it's like, wow, that stuff is behind me. I can move forward without that weight. God's plan for our future isn't the same as His plan for now. So expect things to change. Don't get overly comfortable. Don't get overly discouraged. Be ready for God to use you. Be ready for God to take your life. Last section here. Number 3, call to follow Jesus. Let's read this section. It's a little bit longer. And I got a couple of things here that draw out of this section. So Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who had also leaned back on his bosom at the supper, and said, "Lord, who is the one who betrays you?" So all that to identify God. Okay, most of that word or most of that verse could be replaced with the word God. Okay, Peter saw God, and that's verse 20. So Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, "Lord, What about this man? Pointing at John. Jesus said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Therefore, saying this saying went out among the brethren that the disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him, not die, but only, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is testifying to these things, wrote these things. And we know that his testimony is true. And there is also many other things which Jesus did, which if they were written in detail, I suppose that even the world itself would not contain the books that would be written. We're so programmed in our culture to be trying to make sure everything's fair, especially as it relates to us. Right? You ever hear little kids fighting on the playground? It's not fair playing the game. That's not fair.
Life ain't fair, buddy.
It's not fair. Life is not fair. So Marty and I got married, went on our honeymoon, came back from our honeymoon, and we were house parents for children at a children's home. So we 2-week honeymoon, and day 15 after our marriage, after our wedding, we have 10 second, third, fourth grade boys that we're living in a house with, taking care of, getting them off to school, helping them do their homework every night, stopping arguments, getting their laundry done, getting them to bed on time, making sure they shower. Have you ever met second, fourth grade boys? All that kind of stuff. And so God kind of prepared us for this right here, for our life ahead, right? But all the time they would be like, this is not fair. Life isn't, that's not fair.
There are losers.
And the thing I would often tell them, I told several people, yes, you're exactly right. It's not fair. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll let you sleep out on the street. I'll take away all access to food for you because I want life to be fair. There are people who don't have any of that stuff, who go to bed hungry every night, who don't have a place to sleep. And I want life to be fair. So let's put you on the same level as them. That's not how we look at life. No, we look at the people who have way more than us. We say, that's not fair that they have that. No. What if we look the other way? Do we want life to really be fair? Do we want to live in the circumstances someone else is living in? Do we want to come from that background? So we have this context that life needs to be fair, and that's what we kind of see creeping up in Peter here, isn't it? Jesus, you just told me I'm going to die. In a way I don't want to die. What about John? How bad is it going to be for him? Let's turn the attention off of me, Jesus. Tell me about John and the struggles he's going to face. This is a dangerous place to go. Start playing the comparison game. And it doesn't happen. It never turns out well. Jesus' answer to Peter is really direct. What is that? Jesus is actually introducing Peter. If I want him to live for 1,000 years, a million years, what is that to you? Not your problem. Not for you to deal with. Peter, you're having enough trouble of your own here. Please just deal with your own life. Stop worrying about other people. You're having trouble walking with God now. So just take care of yourself. That's good counsel for us to do. Jesus start looking at, hey, God's doing this. God's giving them this opportunity and they're blowing it. What if I just focus on what God's called me? What if I just focus, and obviously I'm going to encourage others, I'm going to bring others along, I'm going to challenge others. And, if I see someone that I have a relationship with, a connection with, straying away from God, I'm going to challenge them in that. And I'm going to call them back and try to bring them back to a walk with God. But my obsession, my focus doesn't need to be on anyone else. Because there's nothing good that's going to. And Jesus makes it really clear what Peter's focus should be, because he says, if I want him to remain till I come back, what is that to you? What's his next statement? Right? You follow. John's not your job. Your job. John's not your responsibility. John's not your worry. Take care of Peter, and I've given you a job. Follow me. It's really hard to follow Jesus when your focus is somewhere else. But as you say, if you have your hand to the plow, you don't keep your eye. Peter, stop looking at John. Stop worrying about John. Stop competing with John. Yes, he beat you in the race to the tomb. So what? Okay, get over it. Follow. Focus on me. Put your eyes on me. Don't look away. As I mentioned earlier, part of what John's doing in this section, he's showing us how Peter got from where he was of denying Jesus to where he ended up of being an outspoken, just an outspoken person who won so many people for, who made such a difference in the early church. He's showing us that transition. What happened? How did we get from point A? What happened? Jesus crucified, reinstated his mission. The other thing that he's doing is, because John's coming to the end of his life here, 90-some years old is probably about how old he was when he wrote this. And there's this rumor going around the early church that Jesus will come back for John. So what happens in a week, a month, a year? John dies and Jesus has come back. Because they have this wrong understanding. They've taken Jesus' words and twisted them to mean something that didn't mean. So John corrects their faulty belief. He makes it really clear. Jesus never said that he keep John alive till his return. He just said, what if I did? So, his message to the church: don't give up. Don't think the resurrection is not real. Don't think that Jesus' return is not real just because I die before Jesus comes back, because that's not what Jesus ever said. So stop putting words in his mouth. That last couple verses is kind of reminds me of what we read in John chapter 20. John says, there were so many works of Jesus, there were so many things he did in ministry that the world couldn't contain them if we were to even be able to write them all down. John chapter 20, he says, but these are written so that you might. That was the focus of Jesus' ministry. I would challenge you as next time you go through the book of John, next time you read through the book of John, underline every time you see the word believe or a form of the word believe. You're going to see that was the focus of every interaction Jesus had in the first, in his whole public ministry. It was believe, believe, believe. And John said, these things are written so that you might believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And by believing, you might have life in him. That's the whole purpose that John wrote these things down. And here's the amazing thing. Many people have read through the book of John, have read portions of the book of John, and come to faith in Christ because there's more than enough evidence in John's account of Jesus' life to bring someone to faith in Jesus. How does John end the book? God love. Wait till you get to heaven. Stories of God. There's so much more to Jesus than you can imagine. You know, little snip. Wait till you get the story. You're going to realize I didn't have enough. I didn't live for him enough. Because even the world couldn't all that he did for the transforming message of salvation. Death, burial. I got three things. First one, for that area of failure that weighs on some of you have this event or this season of your life that weighs on you. Carry that with you. Ask. So that's exactly what he did. Give that over to God. Say, God, I'm asking for your forgiveness. Confess our sin. Faith, trust. Don't let that season, that event, that decision stop you being effective Savior of them. Take one event, one portion of your life. Ask you. Second, ask God to show you how you can tend the sheep. That was the call he gave to Peter, wasn't it? Tend my sheep, feed my sheep, shepherd the flock, take care of people, reach out to them. Invest yourself in people, not things. Make a difference in someone else's life. Help them take a step closer to Christ. That's essentially what it means to tend the sheep. Be willing to be used by God. Because we have the option to say no to God. You know that? God wants to use us. We can say no. We stop God from doing what he wants to do? No. He'll just find someone who's willing, who's available. God will still accomplish his purposes, but we miss out on it. Be willing. Thirdly, consider this question that Jesus asked Peter. Do you love me? Have that conversation with God. Maybe even this evening. You and God alone. Answer that question honestly for God. You say, yes. I know that I love you. Or God not necessarily agree with the answer. Because love me. To love me, to live. We can't love God. So I want to challenge you. Have that conversation. Yes. Lord, I thank you that you love us. love us enough to use us. You could accomplish all your works, everything you want to do without us. For our lives. You want us to serve you, you want us to be available, so that restoration. You might take those areas and help us turn immediately. Study now. Live a life of faith because see of His love for us, see of His grow our grow.